welcome to this series dedicated to exploring the intersection of artificial intelligence and user experience research. I'm Andrea, your host, and we're here to deep dive into the latest AI-enabled research tools. Thank you so much for joining us, and let's get started and turn the spotlight on today's presenter. Aaron is the CEO and co-founder of Outset. Prior to starting Outset, Aaron was a product and design leader at companies like Untapped, TripleByte, and Tesla. And before that, he was a research and innovation strategist, running a large research and strategy programs at Fortune 500 clients. All right. So I am so happy to be here today to explore Outset. Welcome, Aaron.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. So why don't we just start things off with sort of your elevator pitch? What can Outset do for UX researchers?
So Outset offers AI moderated research interviews. That's where AI conducts and synthesizes qualitative interviews. And we work with customers like Weight Watchers, Open Door, and many other brands you've probably heard of to help get them qualitative data at scale.
It sounds like AI that are running the moderation. Are there other places where your product is using AI to enhance UX research?
We use AI in kind of every bit of our product, not surprisingly. But the key places where it's very powerful is in the moderation. So meaning, how do you conduct a conversation? How do you engage with people in substantive conversation? And the second is, how do you take those conversations and then make sense out of them? I think synthesizing qualitative data has been a pain point for every researcher for all of time, and I think that's something that we're seeing AI can really help with. I think one of the challenges for research in all forms of it is that when you want to go answer a question, you want to gather the insight, gather the input, and you basically have to choose between two categorical methods. You have quant research or quantitative surveys where you can go fast and you can have high scale, large sample, and you basically can never get the depth you actually want to learn the insight, the nuance, the kind of texture of the data. And on the flip side, you have qualitative research, which has historically been incredibly time intensive, very low sample size as a result, and very, very slow to get those insights, but you get that depth. And that trade-off, every method kind of fits into one of those kind of two models, and that has really been a challenge. So ultimately, AI moderated research fits right in the middle.
Where would you say Outset fits into a current user experience research workflow? Like, where is it best utilized in the process?
Where does it fit? So it fits when you want qualitative insight, you want qualitative understanding of your users, but you want it either quickly or you want it across a larger sample, across segments, things like that. But more tactically, I think we see our customers use it in both a kind of handful of generative use cases where it's a matter of I need to understand these three segments of my user base in great detail, or more valuative, where we have a new service or a new product or a new kind of concept we're testing, and I want to understand that.
I think it would make sense to jump in, and if you could briefly show us what it's like to interact with Outset as a respondent.
And so what I'll show you, we ran a study about meal planning, grocery shopping and meal planning. And so it's a study that is kind of accessible, hopefully, to most people. We did it to share the results. We will actually be sharing the results soon in our blog and everything. But basically, just to get in the product, here, the participant has received a link, right? Kind of like a survey, right? And they're going to go and have this conversation with AI. And so they start by seeing some instructions, and then it sets up the interview for them. And this is what we call a video response interview. And so this will take a moment to set up, and then here we are. And what is happening here is that AI is giving us this prompt, this kind of question for me to answer, and then I'm going to respond with my video and audio. And so I'll go ahead and give it a few. So I'm ready to get started. And what's happening in the background is it's transcribing what I say real time, processing it, and then sending it back to our moderator to ask the next question. So here it's great to get started. Tell me about what motivates you to do meal planning. I find it just helps keep me on track with my kind of nutrition goals here. I'm making this up as I go, actually. I'm coming. You're welcome to actually give me some answers too. You can seed this with how I should respond here.
All right.
So here it says, could you elaborate a bit more on specific nutrition goals?
Okay.
You want to give me a good
Yeah,
example I should use?
let's say that, we're trying to eat healthily and stay fit, and so meal planning keeps me from, ordering takeout at
I
night.
like that. So we're trying to just eat healthier and stay fit, and meal planning helps me avoid purchasing takeout several times a week, which is what I would be doing otherwise. But I think that while it's kind of giving my next prompt, it's worth kind of mentioning what's happening under the hood. Is
Yeah.
that as it transcribes, as it kind of, I'll use quotes here, listens to what I'm saying, it's basically deciding how to follow my line of discussion and what I'm saying and dig deeper, probe more, follow the kind of the path I'm leading, and then ultimately with the goal of eliciting thoughtful kind of responses from me. And so and what I'll show you after this part is kind of how you like what's the input mechanism, right?
Yes.
Because of course, as most folks in this call are probably researchers or do a lot of research, the question isn't just how can AI probe deeper, but also how do I as a researcher control that experience and orient it and get the things I want, right? Because you don't want to hand the keys to AI here. It's about how do you use AI to empower yourselves. So this is a video response interview. We also do audio response if you don't want the video. We also have text-based. We even have voice-to-voice based, where AI is talking to you. You're talking to AI. There's no text anywhere, right? It's just a conversation. So we're pushing on kind of all of the different modes, and each of them fit a little bit differently into different forms of research.
How does the informed consent, how do we get them into the product or into
Yeah,
this interviewer?
absolutely. So I'll go ahead and show you uh, briefly on the researcher portal side of it. But to the informed consent, there's an entire screener step where you
Okay,
can
great.
add, and that's what our customers do. Sometimes they add their own NDA language. Sometimes they add the kind of informed consent pieces. But basically, that is left to our customers as they have their own. We are the tool, and they often have their unique approaches to that.
Right. So the screener lets you add informed consent language. It also lets you better target and narrow down the group to just the people who fit your criteria.
That's right. Exactly.
Okay, wonderful. A number of questions are popping up about the how to program the interview itself. So why don't you go ahead and show us that part? Because I think that's part of the magic here.
Something we focused a lot on, and I've leaned heavily on my experience doing lots of kind of, I'll use a funny term here, human moderated qualitative interviews, and try to design it around that thought process. So here we're again in the researcher portal in the guide tab within a study, and the guide is, as it sounds, it is the thing that guides AI primarily through the interview. So I'd think about like this is the anchor for the conversation, and AI is able to explore within those confines, right? It's not going to explore something wildly unrelated, right? It's going to stay within what you've anchored the conversation to, but explore within that. So there are kind of a couple elements I'll mention, and by the way, feel free to jump in or ask questions as I go through here. But
Okay.
there's some global settings, things like where you can change the method. I mentioned video, voice to voice, things like that. You can kind of set the interviewer style. There's some exciting stuff coming up on that front.
How can you control the interview so that the same questions are asked of each interviewee? And I think that gets to that rigid versus exploratory setting. Is that correct?
Yeah, so I can jump to that, which is basically as you set up questions in your guide, and this is the first question and kind of goes down from there, AI will cover every one of those questions. It won't necessarily ask it verbatim to each person. So that is the nature of qual, right? Like the moderator needs to adapt to elicit more, but it's not perfectly consistent in the exact wording. So I'll get to that. Maybe dig a little deeper as I get into the
Great.
question portion. The only other elements I wanted to mention before we get into the kind of programming the guide, it's the kind of the list of questions, is the language. Right, this is something wonderful about AI is that it is, to the extent it's quite fluent in English, it's also fluent in other languages, and that means you can create a guide in English and you can, then run it in 5 different languages.
What are the languages other than English that are available?
Yeah, so you can check out the dropdown has a lot. So we're talking kind of, I think it's about 50 languages. They're not all created equal. So it's, just like any AI system, it depends on the training set. So there are some languages, Spanish is really good. Japanese actually quite good. More kind of smaller languages throughout the world are not quite as good. So it's a bit of a range, but most major languages are supported. So there's a few other pieces I'm happy to come back to, but I want to really drill in on the kind of most important bit here. So when you are creating your guide, you have a list of questions, and those questions are basically are given to AI and saying, hey, AI, go ask these, and then go explore and follow up and understand, as much as you can within this. So in this case, the first question is, tell me about what motivates you to do meal planning, right? So that is obviously a question that is AI. I think we just saw AI asked me in a way that wasn't verbatim, but it's pretty close. And then based on my response, we'll decide to probe deeper, right? And so it will either follow what I'm saying or ask for elaboration, or maybe I said something that's not super relevant. It'll bring me back on track, and it will do that all, like, that's built into the system. That just works. But the really cool thing that we've done to really try to give the researchers the keys here, right, and and for this to be something that enhances their work, is the ability to instruct AI. And so this is where I'll paste this back in. So anything between brackets is actually translated as moderator instructions, kind of like you would for a human, right? Like sometimes you put it in italics or highlight it or whatever, however you do it in a qual guide. But like this is the ability to speak directly to the moderator and say, hey, there's something I'm looking for here that is specific. So in this case, we put follow up to further understand what the drivers of benefit they get from meal planning. So that is a kind of directional probe. Hey, go in that way, in that direction. Other examples are like, hey, if they bring up their own kind of health concerns, probe deeper into what conditions they're managing, right? So it's kind of a conditional probe, or even skip the next 3 questions if something is true. And so you get this ability to have AI run the conversation in maybe the way you would.
That was a part that really impressed me, was the way that you could leave notes and sort of what I consider sort of program the dialogue or the moderator's instructions. And I thought that was really clever.
Yeah, I mean, I think to us it was like it's an interesting idea, basically, natural language programming for a computer, right? I mean, it's a weird concept, and so there's always always a bit of kind of wrapping your mind around it as you start using it. But it really is kind of functions like, hey, you're hiring a third-party moderator and you need to tell them what to do. We also see a lot of folks intersperse multiple choice questions. And so back to the use case, I think there's some really interesting kind of applications around getting a quant-qual mix. I've heard folks talk about, I like to do qualitative surveys. What does that often mean? It's like, I'm trying to kind of validate my assumptions from qualitative research through, a mix of kind of quantity stuff and also some quality questions. And I think that exists in a lot of places in the research we do. And I think that's the ability to do qualitative and quant, which means you're doing at the scale of quant, right? You're doing hundreds, but you're also getting a lot of depth to understand the range of issues or frustrations or challenges or themes. You can kind of do that all at once in one fell swoop.
Someone was asking, can I ask the AI to show a picture or a video to the customer?
Yeah, so absolutely. So stimulus can include images, videos, GIFs. So basically, or even a URL that you want them to go visit. So anything you want to give them, and then have a discussion about the thing you're giving them. You basically can add it to any number of questions, and it will present it while asking those questions. So that is I'd say about half the usage on our platform involves stimulus. About half the studies have some form of stimulus, whether it's comms testing or design testing or kind of all sorts of elements of evaluative research.
How do you approach the need for AI to avoid asking biased questions, or because it has this open-ended flexibility, how do you prevent it from asking leading questions?
Yeah, I mean, that is both an art and a science to, for humans to do that. You obviously want to avoid leading, but at the same time, you want to help people along. And so there's a bit of a mix. The reality is we have, designed and trained this system to avoid that when it is unclear what it should do. It generally is avoiding it. Now, it will, first and foremost, follow your guide. So if you are, putting questions in your guide that are incredibly leading, it will ask them in the way you want because it is here to help kind of enhance your work. That said, when you just ask what motivates you to do meal planning, you'll notice it rarely or never really will kind of lead you to answers in that question.
What is Outset's superpower? We've seen what it can do, but what would you say is its superpower?
The kind of speed at which you can get depth is really something. It is a there's almost always an aha moment with customers, with particularly new customers, where it's like they see the first couple conversations come in, like, oh wow, that's super deep. But the aha moment is like the next day they wake up and now they have 100 of those. And like that is just like so not what we're used to, right? That I think that starts opening folks' eyes to what can be done with this, how powerful that can be. So I'd say that's the kind of number one superpower.
Absolutely. I think for me, my answer is about the multiple languages. I
Mm,
see one of the superpowers is that everything you said and in multiple languages, which is what, the superpower I don't have.
yeah.
So as a researcher, I can, design the perfect study, but I can only run it in English. Um,
That's a great point. And in many ways, the superpower is basically filling in the things we cannot do as humans. The other thing you and I both can't do is be in 100 interviews at once during a
right.
single day. So even in English, right? Like that's not something that we can do. But
Yeah.
but you're absolutely right. It's even more kind of crazy to imagine ourselves doing 100 interviews in a day in 5 languages. And so that is a very cool superpower.
And I think we've covered sort of how you set up the interviewer. And I think for me, one of those aha moments was seeing one of the transcripts.
Yeah, yeah, let me share my screen and we can kind of jump into any of the conversations. Um, so this was the version that we ran, I think the 118 responses. And basically what you can see in the transcript is all the back and forths. Here is the participants video actually speaking and talking about, their own meal planning, journey, an AI summary that kind of tries to kind of wrap together all of their answers and who this person is and what about them. A bunch of metadata that comes through, so who this is a ways that we can remain anonymous and track IDs and kind of track that back, as well as screening criteria, things like that all appear here. And so that's the kind of the experience of reviewing the raw data itself is in this kind of mode. Um, and then obviously what I think we'll cover shortly is the reporting of how you can kind of bring those all together. So basically the way, so you've run 118 here, right? So you're thinking about meal planning, you've run all these conversations, you're starting to poke through them, you're like, okay, I'm starting to get some interesting bits here and there, but how do I take 118 in-depth conversations and try to like make use of them? And I think that's a really hard problem with 20 conversations, let alone 118. And so what you can do is build a report. And basically what a report is a you're having AI go read all the transcripts, everything that's happened, and synthesize that data based on your instruction. So again, you're basically prompting AI, you're instructing your kind of AI assistant here to go investigate the data. And the way this works, we kind of have two elements. There's the structured report and the kind of unstructured bit that I'll mention at the end. But the structured report, you pose questions. You, when I say you, I mean the researcher, pose questions of the data, and AI will go and use that question to go gather the appropriate kind of quotes and numbers and tags and all those things. So in this case, we asked, what are the participants' primary motivation for meal planning? Now that actually came up in multiple places throughout the transcript. That was not a single question. That was actually a topic of ongoing conversation. And so AI takes that and looks through everything, finds all of the instances that this was talked about, extracts those answers, and then summarizes that through these categorical themes, right? So in addition to a broad summary, you can see convenience and time saving was a thematic category that came up in 57 conversations, while saving money came up in 35, health and diet management came up in 32, meal enjoyment and diversity came up in 7. And that's from, those themes are generated by AI and then coded, right? So then they found all the different conversations. These counts are the number of conversations, not incidences, as that's often a better way to think about kind of population kind of stats. And then within each category, it's broken down further. And this is where kind of you can click on the category to get the most relevant quotes for that. But you can also see that AI gives you a deep dive, which is to say, they're motivated. Folks in this category find it easier to plan meals in advance, same time, reduce stress, stay on track. So I can go ahead and now I'm filtering for convenience and time savings, and I clicked this little sub theme of plan meals in advance. And now I can see all of these deeper quotes that are helping support this point. One thing is like AI is not going to develop perfect themes for you being a researcher, right? Like that is no two humans do that the same way. So the idea that it will be a perfection on the first run is just not the right expectation, but rather, is it a helpful first step where you can take this, either get the meaning you need from this and extract your own story and narrative from that, or iterate with this, right? And so we can edit the categories, and you can split out convenience and time saving and see how that affects the kind of numbers and the coding and the quotes that you're finding, and the deep dives. So ultimately, it is a first draft tool for you to iterate with and use AI in a really productive way for yourself.
The other thing I like to do is a principle called start at the end, which is where
Yeah.
you start with your head in like, how am I going to present the data? What do I want my report to look like? And so I generated enough synthetic users to get a report. It was all fake data, right? Or synthetic user data. But I was able to then see, okay, will this interview guide get me the outputs I want in a format that is useful to me? Do I need to tweak my questions? Do I need to refine things? And that's such an unspoken part of our craft that to be able to
Yeah.
make it more concrete and methodical was really nice.
Right? So this is a chat here where you're kind of going back and forth and asking, maybe nuanced questions or broad questions, population level questions, things that may not be as simple to appear in a structured report can kind of have this, GPT style conversation with.
Can you do the analysis in another language, or is that primarily in English?
So yes, you definitely can. And this is where the kind of prompting of AI comes in, whereas when you set up that analysis, right, you can ask those questions in Spanish, for example, and get Spanish answers. And so that, we have, I would say we haven't launched a whole suite of like analyze in different languages tools. There are kind of like all of the edge cases that are probably in English, all the kind of system to copy that's in our product are in English. But you can absolutely ask these analysis questions of AI in another language and get those categorical answers back in other languages.
Wonderful, thank you. That's as a sort of bonus power of using the AI tools is that they don't think in English
Right.
necessarily, right? And so you can ask them to do the analysis and find the categories in Spanish just as easily.
Well, I mean, this is the beauty is like they're not translating word for word. It's not thinking in English and then translating each word into another language. It basically abstracts language to a set of vector embedding. I mean, it's like it gets super technical, but it basically abstracts away the language itself to get
Right.
to more of a semantic meaning. And that's why translations are so powerful.
This language and the quotes, and when you're doing them in multiple languages, I presume these would be the translations of those quotes.
Yeah, so a couple things there. So with languages, if you write the guide in English, you set it to I want to do it in French, you send it out, everything will be done in French. When you run a report, again, you put it all in English, of course, and then the reporting is all in English. So that means the summaries, the themes, all that is in English. We actually keep the quotes in their verbatim language. We don't translate those automatically, but we have a Chrome extension that we work with that we recommend, where basically you can translate it as you go through it. We find it's
Okay.
better to keep it in the verbatim, but then allow you to quickly flip it, as opposed to auto translating everything, because especially if you're going to quote it directly, it's often helpful to keep it in the verbatim.
If you could do the analysis in the foreign language to like search for a spoken passage or search for a word in French or in Japanese. And it sounds like that's possible because you have the quotes in their original language.
That's right. That's right. Exactly.
How does the AI manage sort of local colloquialisms? So, or like turns of phrase, an idiom in English may sound very different in another language, for example.
Yeah, so I'll have a broad answer and then a specific answer. And so broadly, AI models are very good at local idioms because of such massive training sets. And so I'm basically answering a question from the standpoint of foundational AI models. They are really good at this. They're not perfect. And again, it depends. Like it's probably going to capture more idioms in the US than it is in Indonesia. And that's just a reality of training sets. And as those expand over time, AI will get better at recognizing those. However, something we offer within the guide experience is there's a field called context for AI, super open field, put whatever you want there, but it basically gives you another direct line to AI to give it some global kind of context. And in this case, we've had this many times. There's a turn of phrase that's actually really important for this research that you want to put in there and say, hey, this is how people might say it in French. And so you can preload that. Now, granted, you have to know that turn of phrase ahead of time, but you can load that in to, again, give AI like that context so it has every chance of succeeding, right, for what you want to do.
This is great. I think people are getting really excited, and a lot of the questions are turning towards recruitment. So, can
Yeah.
you talk to us about recruitment? Can I bring my own users? Do you have panel integrations? How does recruitment work?
Within recruitment, you can see here, there's a few kind of main options for recruiting. And the real ones I'll point you to is recruit on my own and recruit via Outset. Recruit AI participants is a fun way to test your interview by having AI talk to AI. So it's a useful test. But I would not make business decisions based on that. So the two main, I'll start with recruit on my own. So you get this shareable link and you can use it anywhere. This includes, a lot of our customers will do large campaigns with their own user bases via email. Others will, use some sort of service for a pop-up like an intercom and serve this link to folks in the moment. Others will use third-party panels like Respondent or user interviews, right? And this works with all of those. So you basically use this link. You can pass in metadata. So you can pass metadata in and out through URL parameters. So it's a bit on the technical side, but it's quite easy to kind of pass in whatever data you need to pass in, even without any of their name or email or anything like that, so that you know who's who. So that's the kind of recruiting on your own. And then you can recruit via Outset. And we have integrated a panel as well here, which is a global panel. It's quite good. It's very it's both low cost and very high quality, which is actually an interesting kind of need with AI moderated research where you want depth and you also want it at scale. And so how do you make the economics as favorable as possible with recruiting? It's all about how do you get kind of the best, depth per dollar. And we found that, we found really good panel options that are kind of really good depth and, lower cost where you're talking about, and you can ignore this cost. This is, only 7 questions and for one participant, but we're talking about something like $10 to $15 for a full session. And that's, pretty low cost when you're looking at things broadly.
Yeah. And that's for like a third, like maybe a 10 or 20-minute, 30-minute session.
I'd say that's I'd say about $10 for something like a 30-minute session.
Okay.
So it's
Wow.
pretty low cost.
To summarize, you can either bring your own users or do your own recruiting and direct them using the Recruit My Own, or you can tap into a panel that's integrated and it's very upfront about what that's going to cost you, and you can kind of work within your budget.
Other thing I'll mention is like the ability to iterate together between AI and humans is really interesting. You don't think about iterative qualitative research as much because you're usually like, well, I've got 12 interviews. I got 12 shots on goal here to like have great data. So I'm going to do them all really carefully and do them all in a week and kind of structure it. But when you have an ability to get 50 in a day or an hour, right, you can start thinking about, well, what if I do 5 interviews myself to wrap my mind around it? Use that information to write a really good guide. Go get 50. Learn from those 50. Go find the 3 best ones and go interview them, right? Myself, and then go out to 500 to validate my assumptions. You can start piecing this together in really creative ways.
I love that. Yeah, and I think building on that story, my own experience using Outset, one of the things I was really impressed with, then the interaction between the AI moderator and the AI respondent. And so one of the things that we haven't touched on as much is the synthetic user component, but I think the workflow, part of it, inserting that into the workflow, you talked about the workflow being, a very collaborative part of like do some personal qual, then, you know, leverage the AI systems for large scale moderation and kind of back and forth. But even within running one of the studies, you can have this, you can use some of more of the AI tools that you've built. And it was really powerful for me. I had programmed my first interview guide and I was like, I know how I would run this interview. But what about this AI moderator that's an unknown, right? And, it's the same, it's the sort of same thing that is nerve-wracking when you have like a new assistant or a new partner in research
Right.
where you're like, what's their style going to be like? Is that going to like mesh with mine? Am I going to like want to ask follow-ups where they don't? Like, how is it going to go? And so what I did was I ran the AI synthetic users, the AI users as respondents with the AI moderator, and then I just read the transcripts. And I saw, because the AI moderator doesn't know it's not talking to a
That's
person.
right.
But what I was able to do is look at how it handled, where it probed, how it handled my instructions, right? And it really built my confidence in the AI moderator that it was, you know, going to be a proxy for me in a way and like represent the research goals and ask the questions in a way that I was comfortable with.
Yeah.
And so that was where I found the like it was sort of this like meta moment with like the AI interacting with the AI, but helping me reach a very human goal of like building my trust.
That's
So
great.
I just wanted to share that and say thank you. But also put that out there for others who may be looking at this tool and thinking, what's that synthetic user button all about?
You're totally right that like synthetic users has a place here. It's, we believe certainly that humans are actually the core kind of sources of insight, so we build better services for humans. But I think in the workflow, in optimizing our research and figuring out the right ways to ask it, I think it's a great step in the workflow.
What types of studies is Outset not a good fit for?
Yeah. I find the best way to articulate that is like if you as a researcher want to be in the room to learn a bunch of things and let yourself explore and improvise, right? It's almost like the truly unscripted interviews. Don't use AI, right? Like I think that's a place where let's just say you're interviewing experts or you're interviewing kind of a couple of people so you personally can wrap your mind around every issue that your customers are facing. Do it yourself, right? That's an amazing opportunity to learn, and humans are great at being in the moment and asking questions that pop into our head that are completely unrelated, right? Like, and that can be really productive. And so I think that's one place where don't use AI for that, right? Like use yourself. Another place is when the relationship with the person you're interviewing is critical. So, for example, if you're a founder and you're selling to customers and you're doing research, but you're also, this might be your future customer and you want to develop a human to human connection, definitely do it yourself, right? I think that's a really good opportunity. And beyond that, I mean, more broadly, I see the future of research as just more and more kind of multi-method, mixed method kinds of approaches, right? So it's not a matter of like, okay, well, let's just go ahead and replace every kind of research we do with AI or something like that. It's a matter of integrating the tools thoughtfully.
Right. That makes a lot of sense. And I think, places where immersion is really critical or it's more of an ethnographic style, like that isn't the appropriate use of a tool like this, but that there are so many places where this can improve not only the depth and the quality of the work, but also the efficiency and the speed of it. Are you able to sort of share like which AI model you're leveraging or which models you're leveraging?
Yeah. Yeah. So we're using a number of models that are primarily through Azure. So we OpenAI models tend to be the cutting edge right now. And so we're using GPT models. But we do it through Azure. Azure is more secure, more reliable, and like that is as we work with mostly large enterprises, it's obviously been the security component is very important. So we do that. The models are GPT-4, GPT-4o, GPT-4 Turbo, as well as Whisper for transcription. And we also use some models for voice, like the AI voice for the voice-to-voice product. Yeah, so we're using, obviously, we built a system around those, and so we're kind of incorporating those in different ways throughout. Also, we are using Azure safety tools to make sure that sensitive topics are, or inappropriate or not safe for work kinds of topics are avoided, and we're using the best, cutting edge safety as well. So I think, but we are using like the best, Azure-based safety tools that exist.
Wonderful. How does Outset handle PII or other things that may come up?
Yeah, so we a couple things. So one, we are, in addition to using very secure models, we also are SOC 2 compliant or SOC 2 Type 2 certified ourselves. So we handle it very carefully and kind of the best practices of sensitive information. We wouldn't have made it through all the security reviews that we've done over the last year without that. We also don't need PII at all. So you can, as I mentioned, with metadata and using panels, we can be anonymous, right? It can be a kind of unopinionated survey platform where we don't need anybody's information. I think that's comforting to a lot of folks who are sensitive about it. But lastly, we don't control, obviously, what participants say, and they may say things, but we don't wind up structuring that in a PII form, right? So we don't extract their emails or anything like that, other than whatever they would share naturally, which is always a risk, right, with an open-ended survey, right? And so I think that's how we handle that.
This is wonderful. I think the one other question that came up was around the AI models and the limitation around handling large data quantities of data, large quantities of text, and how you're managing that when you're running 50 interviews, 100 interviews, and you have a lot of transcripted text to be analyzing. There's often limitations when folks are trying to use sort of ChatGPT to do that on their own. How is your system better equipped to handle that?
Yeah, I mean, so there's a few, my co-founder, CTO, would probably have much more technical and better answers, but we've done a study with 500 interviews that were, done in a matter of hours. So we are set up to handle scale. And so that has not really been a huge issue. Part of that is why we moved to Azure, a long time ago, which is that we're able to run a lot more simultaneous, calls to their APIs. And so that allows us to handle kind of parallel conversations. So we found with interviews, not as much challenge. On the synthesis side, that's where you're looking at all that data at once, right? Versus interviews, you're kind of having these conversational back and forths. With that, reports aren't instant. So when you build a report, that report could take 5-10 minutes. That could take 30 minutes, and it just so that is the kind of element where depending on load, depending on how long that study is or how many interviews that is, that can vary. But what's awesome is like users' expectations is like, yeah, synthesizing this would take me a week. So the fact that it takes an hour or 30 minutes or whatever it is, like, is pretty reasonable. And the cool thing is this stuff just keeps getting faster, right? And that's the if you are entirely building for what is possible today, then you're probably behind, right? And we are very much thinking about the kind of speed, goes up, the costs come down. That is the kind of direction that these models are taking, and so we build towards that.
I think there's a few questions around sort of who owns the data that's collected, and is Outset using the data at all for training?
We do not train any models on the data that our customers, collect or put in our system, and neither does Azure. Neither does any of the Azure models. So
Right.
that is a kind of emphatic nobody's training on it answer, and I think that certainly helps give some comfort to folks that
Wonderful.
the data is not going to pop up anywhere else. So there will always be a place for humans to be deeply incorporating themselves into the process and using AI to amplify or accelerate the work that they're doing. And I think so there's kind of always that partnership. And I'm really excited about how our users and our customers find creative ways to bring AI and humans together.
What are the ways that you can license or access Outset?
Yeah, so certainly if you want to try it out, you can always go to our website and Outset.ai, and you can do a try it out there and take an interview. We work with, we have subscriptions, annual subscriptions with our customers, and we can customize that to the amount of scoped to the usage needs, the size of your organization, things like that. And so reach out to us. I think we'll be following up with some ways to do that. And
Yes.
we'd love to hear from you. And I saw some mention of Open Research Initiative. That is
Yes.
another thing that we've done, is what we've kind of it's somewhat limited. I think we've only had the initial thing only had about 5 slots, which are filled right now, but we'll open some more in the near future, which is basically taking researchers like yourself, Andrea.
Yes,
Um,
I am, full disclosure, I am a member of the Open Research Initiative, so I'm doing a study with Outset. That's why I have familiarity with the tools. Yes.
Exactly, which is basically giving researchers these tools themselves to do studies that can be publicized. Because ultimately, like, we're all trying to figure out where AI fits into our workflows and how it complements us. And it's hard for us to educate everybody about what we've seen with our customers because all that data is private, right? And so how can we generate more public data, both about the findings of the interesting research folks are doing, as well as what it's like and where does it fit into our workflows?
And that's one of the studies that's coming in the Open Research Initiative is, people's
Yeah.
comfort around the AI moderator. Um, and so I don't know, is there any updates on that topic?
Yeah, well, I was going to speak to that a little bit. So we've done of course, like a good research tool should do, we've done research on research here, and so we've done a few studies now with participants about their experience being interviewed by AI. And I saw some questions come up, and I think there's a couple big learnings. I'll share some initial ones. We have publicized one study. It's in our blog, and you can check out kind of how participants perceive this experience. And what we found was that the vast majority of people uh, see this as a positive experience and one that is much better than a survey. And that's actually an important anchor point because, we talk about interviewing because for us on the other side of the research, we want the depth of an interview, right? That is this kind of this gold standard of depth in data. But for participants, this is asynchronous. It's convenient. They do it whenever they want. They do it at the pace that they want, and they can do many at the same time. They don't have to schedule anything. People in other time zones, right? It's like all these ways in which that is not synchronous. The experience is like it is a more engaging survey. That is how they
That's
experience it, which is why nobody's offended, right? Because it doesn't feel like the alternative is talking to a human. It feels like the alternative is a dumb survey, right? Like is a survey that doesn't listen to me and understand what I'm saying and dig deeper. And so that was, I think it was 95% of folks preferred this to a survey. And that was, there's a lot of interesting nuggets beneath that, but I think that was a top line finding. And what we're
yeah.
doing now in the study that will publish the findings over the next few days was how much people, like, what are the aspects that are people missing from AI moderation as compared to humans, and what are the aspects that should be brought in? Should there be an avatar? Should we call it a human name? Right? These kind of elements of merging these like the human experience and AI, and we'll publish that shortly. But we're super curious about the participant experience and how that evolves.
That's wonderful. And I love that you're sort of doing research on research as well. I think that's really key. What's next? What can we expect to be seeing from Outset in the future?
Yeah, I mean, it is a super exciting time for a variety of reasons. I mean, one is that, AI models keep getting more powerful and better, and we will absolutely be on the forefront of using what's the latest. And so one call out for all the call it the AI nerds like myself in the audience, like GPT-4o came out. Once all of those APIs are available on Azure, we will be absolutely using those, and that will create a much better voice, video, image, all the kind of multimodal experience that will be, a much lower latency, a much more powerful experience. So I think the modes are really going to evolve and be really fun to play with. And one of the things I'm excited about building in the near future is beyond just the use of synthetic users for that, but it's to do some kind of calibration step. So imagine if you could upload your own transcripts that you've done in the past, like, hey, here's my style. Let's calibrate to that. Because AI is amazing at imitating. Like, it's really good if you give it a little bit of prompting to really imitate a style, a tone, a kind of a logical path. And so I think that's another really exciting kind of direction this will go.
I love that. We could have an interview in the style of, some of the great well-known researchers,
That's
or,
true.
or I could tune it to be my, appropriate, line aligned with my style. That's fun.
Um,
One.
the big thing that's coming up. So this is the sneak peek, but we're releasing something called Outset Interactive, which will be a basically AI moderated usability testing. So
Ooh.
imagine not AI. AI is not just listening to what you say, but also watching what you do, meaning like on your screen, right? So whether you click on the right button or the wrong button, whether you navigate to a weird place and when you're narrating, you didn't mention it, but hey, why did you click there? And so that ability to do the kind of usability is something that we're really excited about as well. And then lastly, I'll just say like the analysis, right? Right now it's a structured report, but there's a lot of ways we're excited, whether it's building highlight reels to stitch together kind of audio and video and images together, or it's kind of more top line insights, evidence gathering, kind of more tools for you to pull it all together. That is a continuing roadmap that I'm really excited about.
Let's see. What should folks do if they want to, try Outset for themselves or get in touch with you?
So basically, I think the link that you sent will send you through kind of a flow to get some of your information and connect, in whatever way makes sense given where you're coming from. So definitely use that as a good first stop. At our website, you can try out interviews, and so definitely try them out for yourself. I think there's often a wow moment of AI listening to you and actually probing pretty well, and so definitely do that. And you're also always welcome to hit me up at Aaron@Outset.ai if you have any questions or thoughts or you want to share your feedback. Um, I would love to hear from you.
Wonderful. Erin, it has been a pleasure. Thank you so much. Is there anything you would like to add as we're wrapping up?
No, this is amazing. I love opportunities to talk about how this is changing research and be excited about it and optimistic. And um, so this was great. So thank you for putting this on.
Thank you so much for spending the hour with me. It was enlightening and a lot of fun.